So, guys, thank you very much for your time. We are here really because of the leadership of one person, Ifeanyi, who has been sending messages, reminder, using his time to make sure that we connect intellectually, and then even in the context of a pandemic, we have an opportunity to be together. So today, for the first series, we have Ndidi. I think maybe one way to describe her, because there are many ways, she's a faith-driven investor. The first one I met her, it was in Arusha in Tanzania, where she was delivering a TED Talk. I had never heard about her before, I had never met her, but she definitely was one of those highlights in the 2 days or 3 days of a TED Talk, because she changed the conversation. She brought to the fore a narrative of change, which is based on the values that she believes in. And especially, she was willing to bring to an audience the power of believing in God in an environment where we like to speak about God in either in a church or in closed doors. But she took the stage and she spoke about how God changed her life and how she's using the power and the understanding of faith to change other people's life. So you can read a biography. If you Google her, you find it. But I think that's how I would like to introduce her today. So Ndidi, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate this opportunity. And thank you, Carl, for your kind words. And thanks to Ifeanyi for coordinating all of this. Your passion, your dedication, your commitment to the Aspen Fellows is unmatched. And you've kept us pushing through. And thank you to Holly and Andrew for your leadership and for your commitment. This is really a special community, and I feel really privileged to be part of it. So I've been asked to speak on social innovation, and I'm going to share my screen. Ifeanyi said, what do you want to speak about? And I said, I want to speak about scaling social innovation in Africa, because as you all know, we need to scale. Our continent currently has 1.2 billion people. It's expected to double to 2.4 billion by 2050, and we should not be doing anything at a small scale. We have to be thinking about impact, reaching millions, and that's what motivates me. So I'll start off by just talking about my personal engagement in the social innovation space, key insights from my research, and a suggested way forward. So this picture on the right is what really has motivated me to do the work I do. I moved to the United States when I was 16 to complete college and get my MBA. And this picture followed me around to dinner tables where people would say, you know, my mom used to say, finish your dinner. There are starving children in Africa, or there are starving children in Ethiopia, or in Eritrea, or Biafra. And this really struck me. This was the face of Africa, a hungry child. And this picture is one that upsets me, one that makes me angry and very sad, because Africa is naturally endowed for agricultural excellence. There's no reason why this should be the picture that follows us. So I've started a number of initiatives in the social innovation space over the last 20 years. The first is called Leap Africa, which is now 19 years old. Leap works in 8 African countries. Started Leap in 2002 to empower young people to be leaders of today and tomorrow, and to change our mindsets that we had to be in positions of authority to be leaders. And Leap, which is currently run by a group of dynamic young people, has a range of programs I lead: youth leadership program, Lead the Way, a social innovators program. And I'm so proud of what the young people have done in our ecosystem. I also am the co-founder of Sahel Consulting, which is a consulting and implementation agency that works in the food and agriculture landscape, transforming this sector and unlocking the potential in the sector. And I'm the co-founder of a food company, which is a social enterprise called AACE Foods, which processes spices, sauces, flours, and complementary food for the local market to displace imports, and also for the international market. And I started this company because of my conviction that Africa, as I said, can feed itself and the world, and that we can produce nutritious food sourced locally, not only empowering our people, but addressing the high rates of malnutrition and starting to change that narrative that I shared with you earlier. So through these initiatives, I was struggling to scale. I felt they were all really impactful initiatives, but they were reaching hundreds and thousands, but not millions. And so I spent some time really working on what it will take to scale in Africa. I spent about 2 years researching this, interviewing organizations, entrepreneurs, funders through a senior fellowship at the Kennedy School. Created an online survey tool to understand what the challenges were with scaling, and then talked to a lot of actors across different ecosystems and health, agriculture, energy, ICT, to really understand what is preventing us from scaling and what will it take. And I also interviewed a lot of social entrepreneurs who are scaling. And I'll share with you some of the highlights from my research and what I've done since then, because this research was conducted in 2014, 2015, but it's still very relevant today because it forms a lot of the work I do. So social innovation is something all of you are very familiar with because you're all social innovators in your own right. And it's basically a novel solution to a social problem where the value accrues to society. So novel doesn't mean a completely new idea, but it can be an old idea that's channeled in a new way, in a more efficient or sustainable way. And when we think about social innovation, Stanford Social Innovation Review defines it as a product, process, or technology, or it could be a principle, an idea, a piece of legislation, a social movement on intervention. And when we think about scaling, there's so many definitions of scaling. You can scale programs, you can scale ideas, you can scale policy. And there are many, many ways to scale through replication, adaptation, through communication, through marketing and distribution. So scaling doesn't just mean, oh, I was able to, have one office in Lagos and now we have offices all over Africa. But it could be that other people have taken your idea and replicated it in their own context. Or that the idea has actually become a global phenomenon. I'm going to share some examples. So the first key learning from my research is that not every social innovation can or should be scaled. Many of our social innovations are not even scalable, and I'll talk a bit more about that. But many people have actually decided, you know what, I don't want to scale. I just want to be the state-of-art model or center of excellence. I remember when Patrick Awa started AACE, and I was so excited about this phenomenal university in Ghana, and I said, Patrick, I'd like to start AACE Nigeria. And Patrick said, no, I want AACE to be a center of excellence. And he was inspired by the Swarthmores of the world. There's another nonprofit I interviewed called Jacaranda. They've done phenomenal work, but they decided we want to be state of the art. Lagos Business School actually calls themselves an oasis of sanity, and they want to stay small and nimble. So it's really about your mindset and what you want to offer as a social innovator. But there are also some critical prerequisites for scaling, which I cover in the book and have definitely used in my own work to scale the initiatives I've started. And this is basic to most of you, clearly having a mission that's well-defined with set boundaries, identified values, a structure that allows for scaling, clear determination of pathways to scale, a business model that is scalable, and then critical components, talent and leadership, the right financing, the right partnerships. And at the end, at the top of your house is a vision. And this is like a sandwich. Your vision and your mission are critical to ensuring that you can scale. And I love this quote by Nelson Mandela, which says, vision without action is just a dream. Action without vision passes the time, and vision with action can change the world. And on our continent, we have a lot of talkers, not enough doers. We need both vision and action to really transform our ecosystem. Now, what do you think about scaling and your business model? It's really important that you think about what success looks like at scale. So many of us, we say in Nigeria, when will you know that you've arrived? When would you know that you've made an impact? And it's critical that we have to understand the problem we're trying to solve, define that problem, and think through the steps to achieve that problem and understand whether that intervention is demand driven. And I love this example of the play pump. I don't know how many of you have heard of the play pump or remember the play pump, but in 2006, I went to the World Economic Forum, and the play pump was celebrated as the next solution to solving water problems in Africa. And I don't know how many of you can see the diagram on the screen, but the idea for the play pump was that children would go around this merry-go-round. And by going around the merry-go-round, they would pump water into this reservoir. And then they would have enough water for the whole village, so women wouldn't have to work for 2 hours to get clean water. Laura Bush supported it. The AACE Foundation endorsed it. They got lots of funding. And then when they tried to scale, they found some fundamental problems with the play pump. The first is that children had to work for 23 hours or play for 23 hours to fill the reservoir. 23 hours of play becomes work, right? They also found out that when the play pump broke, it costs thousands of dollars to fix. When a simple borehole sunk in an African community cost $3,000, this cost $10,000. And they had expected, advertising revenue on top of the reservoir from Coca-Cola and other companies like that. That didn't come forth. So it proved really expensive to scale. And while this is a well-studied example, there's so many play pumps across Africa and across the world. Interventions that are very nicely packaged as a pilot, but when we attempt to scale them, we find that they're too expensive, they're unrealistic, they're not suitable for the communities in which we work. And that's the first question to you all, social innovators. How many play pumps are in your ecosystem? How many play pumps are you running at the moment? For business models to be scalable, they have to be demand-driven with measurable impact. They have to be simple. They have to engage the community. They have to leverage technology, and they have to be low cost. And this demand-driven component is so important because many times we sit in our own little corners and say, we know what the community needs. After all, we live in the community. And if with donor funding, yes, the community will take advantage of whatever you're offering them. But when that donor funding dries up, you really find out, is it demand-driven? Will they be willing to pay through their time, regardless of the amount of money they contribute, something to prove that they really need it and they want it? Most of our interventions are not demand-driven. In my latest book, Food Entrepreneurs in Africa, I tweaked this model a bit to add a few more things, which I want to underscore. So demand-driven with measurable value addition is critical, right? Every model that's going to scale today has to leverage technology, data, and innovation. You cannot scale without shaping your ecosystem, shaping the policy environment in which you work, ensuring that your intervention is cost efficient with dynamic systems and structures, being able to tell your story and package the way you communicate. And that's why the Aspen Institute has been so phenomenal, right, in enabling us to learn how to communicate. But how to build our personal brand, our organization's brand, our innovations brand is critical. And then with COVID-19, no intervention can scale without embedding sustainability and resilience into their DNA. So ensuring that your model adapts to climate change, is agile, mitigates risks and shocks, this is critical. We know that there's so many challenges facing us on the African continent, so many. But it's critical that we think through systematically how we can address both the critical challenges and the opportunities. And so that's so important as we think about the ecosystem and about scaling in this landscape. There are many, many examples of very exciting models that are scaling, leveraging innovation and technology. CalTribe in my ecosystem using cell phone technology in Ghana to connect farmers with vet doctors and others who can help them manage the animal health. And Twiga, which has raised over $60 million, connecting farmers with retailers, roadside retailers that supply fruits and vegetables. Within 14 hours, a roadside retailer can order fresh fruits and it's delivered to them. There are other examples like Nwuneli Pets in South Africa. And their business model is really interesting. When they were starting, they basically were going to be exporting high-value meat to the rest of the world from South Africa. We all love our South African bride. But they quickly found out that there were too many restrictions and that people were willing to spend 3 times what they spend on themselves on their pets. And so now they sell pet food around the world and are proving to be making a huge difference. Beyond the business model, it's really critical that we have talent for scaling. And all of us can agree that finding good people who are mission-driven, who are committed, is one of the toughest pieces of scaling in the African context. But I think as leaders, we have to build our capacity to attract mission-driven high achievers. We have to constitute strong boards of directors. And we have to think about strategies for attracting talent, outsourcing where we need to, investing in our human resource practice, which I've learned the hard way is probably the most important department in any organization, and then succession planning. And many of you know I'm a serial social entrepreneur. I believe that I plan my succession from the first day I start an initiative. It's so important that you leave your company when you're still at the highest high and when you don't become a stumbling block to the success of your organization. We have to leverage technology in every way. And in my sector, food and agriculture, financial inclusion, advisory, market linkages, there's so much around big data and mechanization. And we see that across the board being adopted in the African continent. Branding is really, really critical. And from the name of your organization to the logo, your tagline, your brand promise, your online presence is so critical. And there's some phenomenal examples on the African continent of entrepreneurs who have taken advantage of this. Hello Tractor is one that really inspires me. They branded themselves as the Uber of tractor. And when you talk to Jahel, the founder, he'll tell you that he wakes up in the morning and he listens to the podcast of all the CEOs of the companies he wants to partner with. And he speaks their language. And he connects with them in such a way that they're essentially marketing him. So he's been in Forbes and Fast Company and Washington Times and BBC, not because he did anything directly, but because his partner organizations were willing to put the resources to package him. Java Foods is another example in Zambia. Financing is also a critical issue required for scaling, but through my first book and second book, I learned that there's more money available on the African continent than we can even take advantage of. The challenge is that many of us are not investment ready and our organizations are not investment ready. So you see the same people who keep getting the financing and we wonder why. Why do they get financing and others don't? Because they know how to prove themselves. They have the credibility. They have capable and strong teams. They have strong financial systems and controls. They have strong business models and they effectively communicate what they do. So there's so many grants and prizes now available to us, and it's critical that we position ourselves and others in our ecosystem to take advantage of this, because when we assess this ecosystem, and this is something I've taken on recently, we find that so many others are coming to our ecosystem and taking our funding. Of the 10 startups that received funding in Kenya in 2019, 8 were non-Kenyan, were non-African. In Nigeria, it's about 50%. And I recently wrote an op-ed on this issue around equity. It's really, really important that we think about how to position ourselves to take advantage of financing, because if we keep leaving it on the table, so many others are taking advantage of it. There are many, many accelerators and incubators that help startups, but there are also VC and PE companies. It's also important we shape our ecosystem. And social innovators always think, well, I don't have any opponents. Everybody wants to support me. Unfortunately, there's lots of people who feel that they'll be disadvantaged if your social innovation works. So you have to make sure you understand the policy environment, the culture, the markets, who the enablers are, who the opponents are, who your competitors are, and how you increase the pie so that everybody has a space. And how you convert opponents to champions is critical. There's an example of a company I visited in Rwanda that's done a phenomenal job called Africa Improved Foods. And from the onset, they designed their interventions, bringing in all sorts of funding partners, but also partnering with the Rwandan government and others to scale. In the Nigerian context, I love the Action Health Incorporated story. I actually profiled them extensively. Started by a couple in Nigeria, and they were focused on HIV/AIDS and creating awareness through school clubs. They eventually were able to design curriculum on sexuality education. And the biggest opponent they faced were the Christian mothers. And the permanent secretary in the Ministry of Education was a Christian mother. She felt, you're corrupting our kids. Meanwhile, 12 to 15-year-olds were already sexually active. But they were able to push through over a 10-year period. And now this curriculum has scaled across Nigeria in public schools. M-Pesa is another example. We love to talk about M-Pesa. But when you think about M-Pesa, and I looked at it from a social innovation landscape, M-Pesa was actually born out of a project, if it did, where they were assessing how people transfer money, and they found out that people were transferring airtime to their family members, and the family members in rural communities were monetizing this airtime. That's how M-Pesa was actually adopted and has now become a phenomenon. And if you think about it from a social innovation perspective, the innovation has to fill a gap. It has to address a need or solve a problem. The right partners have to be involved, right? So they were able to get Safaricom and others who already had the network across the country. The intervention should leverage existing infrastructure. So they were able to leverage all these agencies that were selling airtime, right? And if there's no enabling policy, and in the case of M-Pesa, there was none, you have to basically get involved and create one to shape the ecosystem. And I think M-Pesa is a great example, not just because it's unlocked so much else in social innovation. And when you look at the social innovation landscape in Africa, most of the innovations are circled around East Africa, because M-Pesa has allowed people to pay on a daily basis for solar, for childcare, to transfer money in ways we never imagined. And 70% of households in Kenya are leveraging M-Pesa. There are also many examples of scaling in education. And when you think about scaling from the onset, building into your DNA, this is the Bridge International Academies model, or in Canva Youth in South Africa, Replication Teach for All, where in every part of Nigeria, there's a new Teach, there's a board, and they're replicating the idea, but they're all separate entities. The franchise model, which is Kidogo, Shaping Policy, Action Health, and Girls Power, and then Transforming Ecosystems, Leap Africa, through its programs. So there are many examples of how you can scale, and we see different examples in different African contexts. And the final part of scaling is building resilience. You have to build resilience into your DNA. Research indicates that 43% of businesses never reopen after a disaster, and 23% of those that do fail. So the question for us is, how do we build resilience, especially because COVID-19 was one shock, there are going to be many more shocks. So as we think about the future, COVID-19 has brought on so many challenges. And it's really important that we recognize, and I know Brenda was telling us about how, there's serious surge now in Liberia, but we're seeing serious surges re-emerging. So this is creating a lot of challenges, but also opportunities as we think about access to information, knowledge tools, financing, and ecosystem support. So in the midst of COVID, I launched a new business called Nourishing Africa to take advantage of the opportunities in our landscape, but also to help all the work we're doing scale. Because it's one thing to learn, it's another thing to apply it. So the mission of Nourishing Africa is to drive the profitable and sustainable growth of African agriculture and food landscapes by attracting, empowering, equipping, connecting, and celebrating over 1 million dynamic entrepreneurs. And our vision is a flourishing, sustainable, and just food ecosystem, which leverages agtech and digital innovations driven by Africa's vibrant entrepreneurs to ensure that the continent nourishes itself and becomes a net exporter by 2050. And we have a members-only platform, lots of information on funding, which I encourage you to check out, 15 pages of funding opportunities for African entrepreneurs in the food and agriculture space, but also in other landscapes. There's a jobs portal, there's a knowledge portal, we have a First Thursdays, a networking portal, and we just launched an entrepreneur support program training over 1,000 entrepreneurs. We're giving funding to 200 entrepreneurs. And so this is in the space of a year. And obviously we're not at 1 million entrepreneurs yet. We have over 1,000 entrepreneurs, but they're in 32 of the 54 countries in Africa. So it just shows you the power of scaling really quickly. I'm also scaling through the Advancing Local Dairy Development in Nigeria project. And this has been a very complex project, trying to transform the dairy landscape in Nigeria. We started with 2 companies and now we have 5. And another example of the scaling we're doing is with our Sahel Scholars Program. We have a CSV. And what we did was we used to go, shared corporate values, we used to go to school.
Sorry, can we have who's speaking? Can you mute, please? Thank you. Ndidi, go ahead.
Okay, I was muted by the host, but apologies for that. Yeah, so we used to go to 5 schools in Nigeria to get young people excited about Africa. And with COVID, now we're doing it as a virtual initiative, and it's happening on the 7th of July, but we're going from 5 schools, 500 students to 3,000 students across Africa. Really thinking through how we can leverage innovation and technology to scale. And then at Leap Africa, I mentioned that Leap now works in 8 African countries, but we realized we still have to scale further. So we're building a Leap Leadership Institute, a physical and virtual institute, and our goal is 10 million African youth to drive the actualization of the Sustainable Development Goals in Africa. And that's just an example, leveraging digital to say we can reach more teachers, we can reach more young people through our curriculum and through our work. So as I round up, for me, I start off with a picture of hungry children, which was the face of Africa. And this is the face that I'd like us to remember and to think about. As social innovators, what are we doing to leave a legacy of service and impact for future generations? How are we changing our business models? How are we galvanizing others how we partnering, how we shaping policy to ensure that the great initiatives we've started don't just reach hundreds or thousands, but reach millions. Ultimately, that's what it's about. My current mantra is a quote. It's a Tibetan quote that says, if I tell you my dream, you might forget it. If I act on my dream, perhaps you'll remember it. But if I involve you, it becomes your dream too. For every initiative I've started, and I've started 5 probably directly and helped start about 20. The reason why they're sustainable and why they're scaling is not just because I've been able to attract people who are passionate or that we haven't faced our share of struggles, but it's because I've involved others in my dream too, starting with the board of directors, the staff, giving them ownership, shares where applicable, if it's a nonprofit, empowering them and putting them at the front. And it's become their dream too. We need more dreamers and doers on the African continent. And I look forward to working with you all to scale more social innovations together. Thank you so much.
So I'm sure we can do a virtual clap for Ndidi, or either you can open your mics and start clapping.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for being so kind to share so much with us. I have 4 questions, which I wrote as you were speaking, and then the rest of the group can start thinking about the question that they have. Andrew, if you're still around, I know you have to leave, so maybe I will give you the floor if you have any questions if you're still here.
He's gone.
He's gone.
Yeah,
okay.
he left.
Okay, sure. Okay, no problem. So, Ndidi, my first one will be, what would you tell your younger self? So if today you meet somebody that is about to leave Nigeria to go and study as you've done when you were 16, what would you tell that person?
Thank you for the question. I actually have contributed to a book on this subject. What will you tell your younger self? And it's a very difficult one because in Nigeria, a lot of people are talking about plan Bs. I'm sure you've heard, Carl, of the plan A and plan B. But I'll tell my younger self 2 things. I'll tell my younger self, you have been born for a time such as this. We cannot let anybody else change the future of Africa. We are the ones who need to transform our continent, and we can't go anywhere. There are opportunities in our backyard. So for me, going abroad to get a good education is a good thing, but you need to come back and make a difference. So that's the first thing I would say. The second is, I always tell young people, live your life with open hands. And when I say open hands, I mean like this, to be able to give and receive. Now, many young people in our setting at the moment want to be giving, want to receive. But in terms of giving, service, taking your eyes off yourself and looking to others, it's tremendously impactful, but it also makes you have a lot more empathy for others. The second is, living your life with open hands means that you can't plan your life too closely. There are some things you don't expect, but because you have faith in God and because you are centered, you realize that there's some things for you and some things not for you, and you're willing to, you're more resilient when bad things happen that shape your existence. And some of you might know that my husband got shot in 2007 and didn't want to live in Nigeria anymore. We had to move to Senegal. He wanted to move out of the country. We moved to Senegal and lived there for 2.5 years. It was when we were there that I started working exclusively in agriculture. And that time in Senegal birthed 3 companies. So while it was a very negative thing, he's still alive. He couldn't work for almost a year, but it birthed so many other opportunities. And that has taught me that you can't plan your life so closely. You have to just be focused on delivering, serving others, and a lot of doors will be open to you. So that's my message to my younger self.
It's a beautiful message. And continuing on that point around the younger self, because you work in agriculture, there's this element around the urban youth and the rural youth, which is real in the narrative. When you see a lot of conversation, it's often about urban young people that are complaining about changes in leadership and all these different elements. I hardly hear them speak about changes in agriculture, for example. Maybe I don't hear those voices. So what are the voices from young people in rural areas that you hear and then you want to share with this audience?
So in Nigeria, we have a huge challenge right now around insecurity. And so young people in the rural areas are even facing it more than young people in the urban areas. So the voices are around fear, around uncertainty, around whether they can have livelihoods. And many of them are very confused about what the future holds for them in the rural communities. So they're trying to get out. If you see a city like Lagos, and I'm sure Ola was on this call, she can tell us. I think I once heard that every day 5,000 people come to Lagos. I don't know, don't quote me. And these are 5,000 people who are literally coming with the shirts on their backs from those rural communities looking for a brighter future. And so what we're doing with our work, not just with the Aldine project that I mentioned, but also basics and Yiswa, we're working yam, we're working cassava in long-term implementation projects, is that we're giving these young people hope. Number one, we're training them. Number two, including them in the financial landscape, so getting them bank accounts. Through self-help groups, empowering them to be extension workers, to be AIT technicians around vet care, supporting them to have livelihoods so that they can stay in their community, because we need them in those communities. We need them to bring energy and skills and to support their communities. And so that's one of the things we're doing through our work. But is it easy? It's not easy. Whenever I go to talk to young people and say, how many of you have fathers who are farmers? People are ashamed. They're ashamed that their fathers are farmers. They're ashamed to be associated with it. I'm telling you the truth. So we're trying to change that mindset and give them an alternative narrative that you can be in our sector and you can make a living, a decent living, and have a future.
Thank you. I'll combine my last two questions and I'll ask people to start raising their hands so that we can you can get your questions to Ndidi. I was very interested around the point that you raised around scaling in centers of excellence. And it would be interesting to understand from your perspective, how do we frame this on the continent between this sort of, where do we find the balance between the two, between the scaling and the centers of excellence? And related to that question is, where do we find the capital? Is it always going to be capital coming from outside the continent, including diaspora, of course? Or do we start to harness all these entrepreneurs that exist on the continent that have not yet reached the scale, for example, of Mr. Dangote, because they have transformed the business from being informal to formal, and they have really scaled to larger, because there are many of these individuals across the continent?
Thank you. I think that's an excellent question. So I'll use the example of Jacaranda, one of the companies that I profiled in my first book. They had come up with a way to help deliver babies for $80 at the time. I don't know what it is today, $80. And it didn't matter how complicated the birth was. They had perfected the maternal process. And they first started saying, okay, we're going to have little clinics around Nairobi and around Kenya itself. And then they realized they're not going to be able to scale as fast as working with the federal government and the national government. So they decided, you know what, we're going to document our approach. We're going to create training processes, and we're going to go into the public healthcare centers, and we're going to train nurses and doctors to utilize our approach to ensure that no mother has to die during childbirth. And that has been how they scale. And it was a phenomenal approach. So you have to look at your business model and say, number one, what is my appetite for pain and risk? Because scaling is not easy. You sweat, you get a lot of gray hair. It's tough, right? And then what is the best way to scale? So in our case with Leap Africa, we could have built a huge, school to train young people. You have examples of Africa Leadership Academy, etc. But we said from the beginning, and we're older than Africa Leadership Academy, the fastest way to scale is to actually introduce our curriculum into public schools. So we scaled by training teachers to deliver our curriculum. We didn't have a physical school. And now we're training teachers, and so our curriculum is in Amharic, our curriculum is in Swahili. That's how we've scaled, working with governments to introduce our curriculum because in education, the fastest way to scale is through, because education is still a public good, is through partnering with government. So you have to look within your ecosystem and decide what success looks like to you and what your appetite for pain and risk is, and whether you can find the right partner. So it's almost like a checklist that you go through to determine your own approach. Now, technology allows us to scale in so many new ways, Carl, than when we started 20 years ago. And that's why LEAP is now introducing the virtual institute. That's why Nourishing Africa exists and can train thousands of entrepreneurs at the same time. And I think there's so many new ways to have a center of excellence and scale leveraging technology that we didn't have before.
Excellent. I see Danjuma has a hand up. If the other people, please raise your hand so that we can continue the conversation.
Oh, so second question. Sorry, Carl. Your second question really is an important one. And you'll be shocked that when I wrote my first book, most of the companies I profile are the Bridge International Academies, the One Acre Funds. They're all foreign founded. They raise money in ways me and you cannot. They have credibility in ways that me and you have to sweat to build. And it was very painful to me. And that's why actually after writing the book, I decided to join the Global Philanthropy Forum for about 6 months. And I incubated the Africa Philanthropy Forum, which exists today. And I met you as well through that. And I served as the director, and now I sit on the board. And the whole mission of the African Philanthropy Forum is to galvanize strategic philanthropy in Africa so that we can fund ourselves. And I think we need to change our mindset. Carl, as small as Sahel Consulting is, we have a CSV. We have a fund, which the company matches threefold, and we have strategic initiatives that we give to. AACE Foods does the same. So I think one of the things I have personally started doing is showing people that as an SME, you can give. During the COVID-19 pandemic, AACE Foods gave to 5 states in Nigeria. You don't have to wait to be strategic in your philanthropy. You don't have to get to the size of Dangote to make a difference in your community. Start with your context. And we give a lot in our context, but we don't give strategically. And so we've also started a family foundation, Mezo and I, and it's called Muna. And we're not billionaires, Carl, but we start a family foundation to be more strategic about our giving. So my challenge to all of you on this call is, yes, be strategic about your giving. Start a foundation. All of your organizations should have a CSV. And as you're growing, you know, the staff are so excited about it. In fact, the staff run the CSV initiatives and they choose who we support and who we fund every year. And we're an SME. And so I think it's really, really important that we become more strategic about our philanthropy. We engage with partners, we support organizations. And for us with our Muna Foundation, we've gotten our kids involved. And every year, Mezo actually does a presentation to the kids to saying, this is what we were able to achieve this year. 50 people in our village got health insurance. You know, we were able to pay for 10 people's school fees, you know, whatever it is, so that they also realize that it's so important to give. So you're passing it on to the next generation.
It's beautiful the way you explain how you are actually teaching your children, and I don't know how old they are today, and connecting them to the work that you do. And those seeds, we don't know how they will germinate, but clearly it's a very good example for all of us to think about. So Danjuma, the floor is yours for your question. And please remember, it's a question. It means that there's a question mark at the end. You can have a comment as well, if that's what you want to do. But if it's a question, let it be a question.
All right,
Over
Carl,
to you.
thank you. Actually, it's more of a comment because I'm supposed to jump off this meeting at 4:30. But
Okay.
I felt I won't do this program justice if I don't mention this. My charity was one of the LEAP Africa partners in Taraba State several years ago. So it was quite innovative, we learned a lot, and that's so many years back. So I felt I wouldn't really do justice to Ndidi at this program if I don't mention this. And I also saw Ndidi on stage in Arusha, TED Global. Very beautiful, wonderful presentation. So yeah, LEAP Africa indeed made a lot of impact in the lives of the young people in Taraba State when my NGO was the partner organization with LEAP Africa. So kudos to this meeting, and then nice to see all of you. One great thing I learned from this the talk by Ndidi is, which is one of the challenges chief executives face, is leadership succession. It's a very big problem. You have this passion, you have this dream, but you seem to have people who see your organization just as, probably just a face in their life, and they don't really own it, they don't drive it. And that is a very huge problem founders of institutions, like I'm a founder of my organization, really face. So I look forward to actually learning more. I'm learning, as I did put up on the platform, and I'm a very village person from my village in Taraba. But nice really listening to this presentation. Over.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Danjuma. We've actually written 2 books on succession because I've done it now about 5 times. And I had to write about it because it was so tough. The first time was brutal. And so I would love for you to, I'll get some copies to you, Danjuma, since you've said such kind words about us.
Awesome.
One is called Passing the Baton, and it's really important. And then the other one is Defying the Odds, Case Studies of Nigerian Companies that have survived generations. But you plan your succession from day one, and you put in place systems and structures to really get it done. And I'm running through a very successful succession now at Sahel. I'm really excited. And Nourishing Africa started with 2 clear CEOs that I brought in who had worked with me. And so I already have a succession there. I'm just a chair. And Leap Africa and AACE Foods are doing very well without me. So it just shows that it's possible within our ecosystem. It's not easy, but it's possible. So I'll get the books to you. And I encourage all of you to also look out for the books.
Thanks, Ndidi. Thank you.
Okay. I don't see any hands. So maybe I'll ask a question to, maybe I'll ask Mavis to think about it. Because Mavis, I saw recently that you were talking about tomatoes in Ghana and the importance of their role in developing micro, small, medium enterprises. So maybe you want to share a few words on this, and then let's hear from Ndidi's experience if there's anything she can also comment on. Mavis, are you with us? Okay. Okay, Ndidi, where can your books be purchased? That's a question for Daisy.
Yes, yep. Leap Africa has some books. I'll just put in the Leap Africa website, and I know some of them are online. And then in terms of my books, Sahel Consulting, I'll put the link. Food Entrepreneurs in Africa. So for those ones, and then for the one on scaling, social innovation, for those who are not in Nigeria, it's also on Amazon, but it's quite expensive. In the Nigerian version, I sell it closer to $5 or $10, between $5 and $10. So you can buy it from our Sahel office. Just send me an email. Or you can pick it up. Anybody who wants to pick it up, I'll give them a free copy. Because Amazon is too expensive and I don't get the royalties. So we'll get free copies if that's the problem. I'm happy to talk about publishing books for those who want to publish books, but many of these international publishers are not very good about paying royalties. So I always say, please get rights to West Africa so that you can sell your own books.
Okay, so asking if there's an ebook version.
So Reaching Millions with Impact, all the books have ebook versions. The publisher has, but in Nigeria, the one on food entrepreneurs, Nourishing Africa, sells the e-version. So you can find it on our website, the link I provided.
Okay.
And for those who are in Nigeria, if you want a book or you can send somebody to the Sahel office, you can get a free book.
Great. Okay, so I guess Mavis may not be here or not wanting to share, I don't know. Holly, let me go to you. You have seen many of us in different aspects. And I think it would be good to hear from you, maybe the 2 or 3 things that are shining light when you think about Ndidi. Putting you on the spot, yeah?
Yeah. I mean, I'm always just amazed by how much you've done in Ndidi, like starting multiple organizations and multiple books. And I know you're so active in various organizations, and I'm just always like, how does she manage? And I know you're a mother, how do you manage everything? I guess that would personally be a question. It's just how do you balance everything that you're doing? And how do you keep having ideas and motivation? I know many of you know that I've done a lot of work on gender-based violence and, wrote books and did consulting and had been doing so much, and I burned out quickly. Not quickly. I burned out after 12 years of doing that on the side and then becoming a mother. So I guess just personally, I'm just like, how do you keep going and having these visions and having this, these ideas and writing, and you have, another new book had just come out. So I guess that's not answering your question, Carl, exactly, but I guess in a roundabout way it is, because I'm just amazed at so many of our fellows are like that, though, where I don't know, I think a lot of you have such powerful origin stories too, from when you were younger, that motivate you long term. So it sounds like a little bit, maybe that's part of it for you, Ndidi, that you've had this, you're rooted in a motivation to make sure Africans are fed and through African channels, from a young age. But anyway, I guess those are some random ramblings that come to my mind as I think about you and all that you have done and are doing. It's just, yeah, how do you keep having how do you have the time and the motivation and the ongoing interest without feeling like you've done it all or lost interest, or I don't know if that makes
Thank you, Holly. No, it makes sense.
Yeah.
You are a one superwoman, so I applaud all that you do. And you handle pressure so well from all of us, because we are so dependent on you. So thank you. I would say that for me, it's really, I don't think there's anything unique. It's just that I ask for help. So it doesn't take anything away from me to ask for help. And so I've built a village around me. So some of you know, and I talk about this a lot, and Holly, for the women in particular, we have to build a village. So in Nigeria, I'm part of a group called Power Girls. Somebody else started it, and we meet once a month. At the beginning of the year, we set out our agenda for the year, personal, professional. We actually do PowerPoints, and we spend a whole day, like 8 hours together, mapping out our expectations, and they challenge us to dream bigger. We challenge ourselves. And then all through the year, they're reminding us, Ndidi, you said you're going to do this. Why haven't you done that? So that's one group. Another group is HN Girls, and that is a community around motherhood and support. And some of these ladies, I travel, they bring soup to my house. They bring food for my kids. You know what I mean? They call my kids to check on them. And another group that I started of couples, because marriages are under attack. So we actually have like 10 couples, and we pray together, and we've been meeting for over 10 years. And so whenever my husband complains I travel too much, there are other women in that group who travel more than I do. There are other women in that group who are more ambitious than I am. So it's always good. It helps stabilize, the marriage, and it's supported. We've supported each other in our works and our marriages, and and our goal is we're going to celebrate our 50th anniversary, and so having that community. So I've created communities, and then I have a really close family network as well, my siblings and my parents. So asking for help is incredible. It doesn't take anything away from you as a woman, as an individual, and that's my first advice. The second is, you pace yourself, because I realized you can't do everything well at the same time. And there were periods where I really, some of you might know I was a young global leader at the World Economic Forum, but that was also during a part-time when my kids were quite young. So I couldn't do a lot of the trips. I couldn't, and it's so funny. Once I was invited to the White House when Obama was president, and I didn't go because my children had something else going on. And recently my kids asked me, do you know Obama? And I said, I don't. But I was invited to the White House, and they said, stupid mommy, you should have gone. So at the end of the day, you have to make choices and live with them, right? That you made a choice to prioritize your family for a given time. And at some point, your kids get older enough that they don't need you every day. But you can't do I say it's a women, you can have it all, but not all at the same time. And then the third thing is obviously my faith. Carl started off talking about my faith. I get burnt out all the time, but it's really a source of strength and courage and renewal and prayer and reading the word and really surrounding myself with people who believe in the impossible has really been foundational to my life. So those are the three things. But is it easy? It's not easy. I want to mention my new organization I'm starting. It's called Changing Narratives Africa. And it's really focused on changing the way the rest of the world sees Africa by showcasing phenomenal people who have changed narratives and products and innovations from the continent that many people don't even realize are from the continent. So that's the newest entity. It's actually going to be registered here in the US, and watch this space. For those who are interested in partnering with me, I'm very open to partnerships and working with all of you.
Thank you. Such wonderful advice. Thank you.
So Holly, thank you very much, because you gave us a new insight and a different perspective to this conversation. And I can see in the comments that people actually started to suddenly be lightened up by the fact that Ndidi shared personal elements and very important on how it is possible to actually be resilient, which is what you have demonstrated to us today. We have 5 minutes, and I think instead of me closing this session, I will invite the person that has allowed us to be here. If you can please come and do us the honor of closing this beautiful opportunity that you have given us.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Carl. I think it's Holly that has allowed us to be here, and by extension, the New Voices Fellowship. So I guess I'll start from there, thanking the New Voices Fellowship, Holly, Andrew, for supporting us to make this a success. And Ndidi, I don't even know where to start, to be honest. You're such an inspiration. You've done this for such a long time. I remember the first time I heard about LEAP. I was a young doctor that was like 4 years out of medical school. And I heard about LEAP. Some of my friends were volunteering. So you've been in this space for such a long time. And I know you're a very busy person. And to have agreed to, to speak to us, that I do not take lightly. And I thank you for this. Also grateful to all the senior fellows who have made that time to be part of this. And thank you, Carl. Excellent moderation. I guess I'll just pass it to Ndidi. Any final words?
Thank you so much. Once again, I want to thank all of you for joining. This is such an honor. I was supposed to go somewhere today, but I was telling my parents, who are actually in the US with me, that this is a community of my peers. Once have asked me to speak, I'm nervous. All of you are rock stars and so accomplished in your own right. And I'm honored that you'd asked me to speak. I really don't take it for granted. It's a privilege. And we keep on sharpening each other and learning from each other. Ifeanyi, you're such a role model because you churn out stuff every day. I don't know how you do it. You're a prolific writer, but also such a thought leader in the health landscape. And I'm just honored and by this opportunity and in awe of all that you do. So thank you, Ifeanyi. Thank you, Carl. Thank you, Holly. Thank you to everyone. This has been wonderful. And I look forward to joining into future sessions, and I'm sure we'll learn a lot from each other. God bless you all and enjoy the rest of your day. And let's scale some organizations on the African continent to reach millions.
Absolutely. Thank you. All right. Bye, everyone.